tariff doesn't necessarily mean a 50% price increase because the tariff is only applied to the imported beans. Still, it will undoubtedly increase prices, squeeze profit margins, and could affect things like wages and inflation.
President Trump are increasing tensions with two U.S. trade partners. As of today, 50% tariffs are officially in effect for Brazil.
Brazil, as an example, has been...
I wish this wasn't happening, especially to small businesses at this time.
Then when you add tariffs, possibly, on top of that, then, your cup of coffee may double.
What if your morning coffee became the next casualty in a global trade war? One quiet morning, as millions of Americans filled their mugs, the U.S. government imposed a sudden 50% tariff on all coffee imports from Brazil, disrupting a supply chain that had run smoothly for decades. From the green hills of Minas Gerais to coffee roasters in New Jersey, Brazilian beans have powered everything from small-town diners to major global brands. Overnight, that dependable flow of coffee was thrown into chaos. But the real surprise wasn't the tariff. It was Brazil's response. Standing firm, the Brazilian president declared from São Paulo, "I will not humiliate myself," refusing to negotiate. In Brasilia, this wasn't just defiance. It was a calculated message to Washington. The U.S. market flinched. Brazil didn't. The refusal to back down marked a turning point, signaling a trade war that Washington could no longer control. It left U.S. officials scrambling to respond. Almost immediately, traders began shifting contracts. Roasters rushed to adjust their blends. Cafe owners and buyers were left asking the same question. If Brazil isn't sending its coffee here, where is it going instead? Early signs suggest that Brazilian coffee may bypass the U.S. altogether, heading toward markets that offer political stability and better profits. For the U.S., it's a jarring wake-up call. For Brazil, it's an opportunity to redraw the global coffee map. And for consumers, it likely means higher prices and the disappearance of familiar blends, possibly before you even notice the change. Prices are already rising. This trade showdown might just change your morning cup for good. It all started with one move. On August 1st, 2025, Washington's 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee shattered what had been a stable and long-standing trade relationship. The next day, Brazil's president made it clear he would not back down. That declaration sent ripple effects through coffee markets worldwide. Traders rerouted contracts, and roasters had to rethink everything. To understand how deeply this hits the U.S., consider the sheer scale of America's coffee consumption. According to the latest USDA data from August 10, 2025, Americans consume over 24.5 million bags of coffee annually, worth around $3.72 billion, or an average of 10.8 pounds per person. Brazil alone supplies more than 8 million of those bags, about 30% of the total. That makes Brazil the top coffee supplier to the U.S. out of more than 70 exporting nations. Domestic production is barely a factor, limited to small specialty farms in Hawaii and Southern California. For the world's second largest coffee consumer, imported beans aren't a luxury, they're essential. Brazil's Arabica beans form the foundation of mainstream blends sold by giants like Dunkin', Tim Hortons, Starbucks, Maxwell House, and Kirkland. Brazil's value isn't just in volume, it's in reliability and cost efficiency, delivering consistent quality at scale for commercial roasters. But that's now under threat. Combine the new tariff with July's 12% spike in global oil and shipping costs, and the cost of importing Brazilian coffee to the US has surged 25 to 35%, depending on contract terms. On paper, those numbers may look manageable, but on store shelves, the impact is clear. A pound of standard ground coffee that sold for $6.90 to $7.10 earlier this year now averages $8.13. In high-cost states like California and New York, prices have passed $9 per pound. For families buying 3 to 4 pounds a month, that's an extra $36 to $60 per year. My customers are everyday coffee drinkers, says Rick Walters, a 54-year-old grocery store owner in Ohio. They complain, but they're still buying because there's nothing else that tastes the same at that price. Still, cost isn't the only issue. Even if Americans are willing to pay more, the volume of Brazilian coffee reaching US ports is already falling. In the first week of August alone, Brazil's Coffee Exporters Council reported an 18% year-over-year drop in shipments to the US. This isn't due to a supply shortage. Brazil still produces more than a third of the world's coffee. But with the new tariff, Brazil has lost its price advantage in the US bulk coffee market. For us, the math doesn't work anymore, says Marcelo Tavares, head of a coffee growers cooperative in Minas Gerais. With the tariff, we can't compete in the low-cost market. Selling to the US now barely breaks even. Sometimes it's a loss. So exporters are moving fast. Just 3 days after Washington's announcement, China granted export licenses to over 220 Brazilian coffee companies. The aim? Reach a billion-strong market. The European Union, South Korea, and Japan have also taken steps. In Germany, retail giant Rowe signed a long-term deal with a Brazilian co-op that once supplied American roasters. But no single market can instantly replace the United States. The sudden break in such a critical part of the coffee supply chain has sent shockwaves through logistics networks. Every bean of Brazilian coffee travels through a complex chain, from farmer to transporter to port to shipping company to US importers to roasters, and finally to your local supermarket or cafe. One disruption anywhere along that path can affect the whole system. Now, US importers, especially small and mid-sized businesses, are looking for new sources in countries like Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. But none of them offer Brazil's combination of scale, quality, and availability. Switching coffee suppliers isn't just a simple swap, it's a logistical and financial puzzle. It involves renegotiating storage contracts, rescheduling shipping, and adjusting roasting processes to accommodate new beans. Every step adds cost and complexity. We tried Vietnamese Robusta to fill the gap, says Linda Chen, owner of a small batch roastery in Seattle. But the flavor was different, and our regulars noticed right away. To keep them coming back, I've had to absorb the extra costs myself. And for many cafe owners like her, preserving the unique flavor of their blend is more than just business. It's preserving a part of their customers' daily routine. That comforting, familiar cup of coffee is now under threat. As the industry adapts, the US coffee sector finds itself in unfamiliar territory. Higher prices, tighter supply, and a sourcing strategy that's becoming more scattered and uncertain. What was once a stable, streamlined pipeline from Brazil to the American market has become a risky, expensive gamble, one that's forcing the entire industry to rethink how it secures its most important ingredient. One tariff, 1 week, and decades of coffee trade unraveled. Replacing Brazilian beans isn't as easy as placing a new order. Especially for small roasters and retailers who rely on low-cost, commercial-grade beans, each change triggers a domino effect. Supply chains must be rebuilt from scratch. New storage deals are needed. Shipping costs must be recalculated, and roasting techniques need to be fine-tuned for different bean characteristics like size, density, and moisture. Each of these adjustments inflates prices. Each new supplier introduces a risk, and every delayed shipment forces yet another price revision. Consumers are already feeling it. As of August 10th, 2025, USDA data shows the average pound of ground coffee is selling for $8.13, up more than 15% from January. For the millions of Americans who drink 1 or 2 cups a day, that adds up to an extra $6 to $10 per month. A family that goes through 4 pounds a month could be paying roughly $48 more per year. If they prefer premium or organic blends, that increase can climb to $100 or more. It's basically a tank of gas or part of the heating bill, says Patricia Lane, a single mother in Michigan. The 16% price hike since spring has outpaced inflation on staples like milk, rice, and eggs, turning coffee from a quiet indulgence into a budgeting decision for many families. The impact isn't evenly spread. Large chains like Starbucks and Tim Hortons are certainly facing higher ingredient costs. But analysts at TD Cowen say Starbucks, thanks to its size and loyal customer base, will likely absorb the increase, shaving about half a percentage point off its North American profit margin, or hundreds of millions of dollars. Dutch Bros, which sources over half its beans from Brazil, may see its costs rise by 1.3% and profits dip slightly. But for tens of thousands of small, independent cafes scattered across small towns and suburbs, the shock is far more serious. These businesses don't have negotiating leverage, supply chain diversity, or marketing budgets to soften the blow. Over half of them rely on Brazilian beans for their signature blends, prized for being mild, flexible, and affordable enough to keep razor-thin margins intact. Brazil isn't just about volume, it's about consistency and roastability, says Tom Reynolds, who runs a 20-seat cafe in Kansas. Since the tariff took effect, his distributor hiked prices nearly 40%. He switched to a cheaper Southeast Asian Robusta, but customers immediately noticed the taste difference. It was like losing the soul of the shop, he says. In just 3 weeks, his sales dropped 18%, and he's since reduced business hours to stay afloat. Stories like his are echoing across the country. In Nebraska, a cafe that built its name over 12 years on a 70-30 Brazilian-Colombian blend saw foot traffic fall by a third after switching beans. In Oregon, a small cafe owner laid off 2 staff and cut the pastry menu in half to manage costs. In Florida, a Cuban-American cafe once known for smooth Brazilian espresso is struggling to meet expectations with a blend of Vietnamese and Honduran beans, causing a noticeable drop in weekend tourist traffic. One tariff, 1 week, and decades of coffee trade unraveled. According to the National Coffee Association, small shops have reported an average 12% drop in revenue since the tariff came into effect, and that's before factoring in rising labor and energy costs. But while Main Street businesses are feeling the pain, some players are seizing the moment. Experts say this disruption isn't just economic, it's cultural. Coffee is an anchor product, says Daniel Vega, senior analyst at the International Coffee Organization. When prices rise or quality dips, other sectors feel it too. He explains that bakeries lose morning traffic, bookstores lose afternoon browsers, all because the cafe next door had to raise prices or change its brew. This kind of ripple effect is especially damaging in small-town America, where coffee shops often serve as informal gathering places, job boards, or local news hubs. Lawmakers are starting to take notice. Representative Linda Martinez from California's 12th District, home to dozens of independent roasters, has called for an immediate review of the tariff's long-term impact. She warns the policy could collapse an entire tier of our food service economy while delivering no real benefit to domestic growers. Her concerns are echoed by the U.S. Small Business Administration, which on August 8th urged targeted relief for small and mid-sized businesses disproportionately hurt by commodity tariffs. Meanwhile, global markets are moving fast. Arabica futures in New York have jumped 34% since June, hitting $2.40 per pound. Robusta prices in London have surged 56%, now at $1.95 per pound. Vietnam, the world's second largest coffee producer, has already locked in forward contracts for most of its 2025 harvest with Asian and European buyers, leaving little available for sudden U.S. demand. Ethiopia and Colombia are facing similar constraints, with shipping lead times stretching to 90 days or more for bulk orders. And in all this chaos, Canada is playing it cool. Ottawa hasn't retaliated with tariffs or entered the fray of trade disputes. It's avoided political grandstanding, staying quiet on the global stage. And that strategic calm, say trade experts, might just give Canada a surprising edge. For Brazilian exporters looking for a stable, tariff-free market, Canada, with its strong coffee culture and dependable trade policies, is becoming an increasingly attractive long-term partner. If you suspect this shift in the global coffee trade is bigger than it seems, you're not wrong. Canada's quiet role in this brewing story is only just beginning. According to industry data, Canada imported over 111,000 metric tons of Brazilian coffee in 2024, a 7% increase from the year before. And forecasts from the International Coffee Organization, ICO, suggest that number could rise significantly in the wake of recent U.S. trade policies. For Brazil, now cut off from its largest buyer, the combination of Canada's steady regulations, strong per capita consumption, and well-established retail networks offers a rare opportunity: a stable and welcoming market. If Ottawa secures even a single long-term supply deal, the US could lose its dominance in the coffee trade within just 3 years. That kind of shift would fundamentally alter Washington's influence over coffee trade across the Western Hemisphere. And as we look further into 2025, the next chapter may be written not in American cafés, but in Canadian cups, filled with beans once destined for US shelves. New data from the ICO, released on August 10, 2025, projects that Brazilian coffee imports into Canada could grow by an estimated $67 million in the next few years. That would make Canada the third fastest growing market for Brazilian coffee, behind only France and one other European country. While these figures might seem like dry trade statistics, they point to a much deeper transformation in the balance of power within the global coffee economy. Walk into a small cafe in downtown Toronto, or a family-run shop in Ontario, and the impact becomes much more real. I'm still drinking the same coffee I've had for 15 years, and the price hasn't really changed, says Mark Henderson, a retired railway worker and regular customer at his local cafe. But I've got friends across the border saying it's not the same anymore. This kind of price stability doesn't make headlines, but it matters, especially to older Canadians who remain loyal to their favorite blends for decades. Canada's decision to stay out of the trade conflict, avoiding retaliatory tariffs, and letting the market operate freely has helped shield consumers from the sharp price hikes now hitting US shoppers. Domestic brands like Tim Hortons, Kicking Horse Coffee, and Ethical Bean have been able to maintain stable prices, keep their supply chains running smoothly, and in some cases even grow their market share, while many US competitors scramble to adapt. We've definitely seen more American online orders since July, says Maria Luke, operations manager at a Quebec-based roastery. People are looking for price stability, and right now we can offer that. In Canada, the morning cup of coffee still tastes the same. A small comfort in a world where even simple pleasures are increasingly fragile. In Ottawa, that calm approach became a powerful strategy, and it's starting to hit Washington harder than any tariff could. Behind closed doors, US trade officials have begun warning that Canada's quiet maneuvering is steadily eroding America's leverage, one shipment at a time. That's when the realization hit. This isn't just about coffee anymore. While no official announcements have confirmed new Brazil-Canada trade deals, many industry analysts believe billion-dollar agreements are just over the horizon. For Brazilian exporters, Canada presents 3 big advantages: no tariffs, no political interference, and a stable, high-income consumer market. The Coffee Association of Canada reports the industry is worth nearly $8 billion Canadian dollars annually, making coffee the country's second most consumed beverage after water, outpacing even beer, soft drinks, and tea. With nearly 72% of Canadian adults drinking coffee daily, Canada ranks among the top coffee consumers per capita globally. And with that scale, Canada is no longer just a buyer, it's becoming a key pivot point in the world coffee market. At a time when the US market is more unpredictable than it's been in decades, Canada's calm and measured approach is emerging as a serious competitive advantage. In trade, sometimes the smartest move is doing nothing, says Jonathan McBride, a senior trade policy advisor in Ottawa. By staying out of the fray, Canada has become a safe harbor for global suppliers. And for American coffee drinkers, the contrast couldn't be more striking. Many are now paying more and getting less. The question is how long they'll accept that reality. If the US decides to expand tariffs to other top coffee producers like Vietnam, Colombia, Ethiopia, or Indonesia, the stakes could rise dramatically. In capitals from Hanoi to Bogota, trade officials are already preparing countermeasures, studying how to turn Washington's policy decisions back on themselves. The future of the coffee trade is shifting rapidly, and no one can say for certain what tomorrow's cup will taste like or how much it will cost. What started with Brazil might only be the beginning. These countries don't just fill warehouses, they shape the flavor map Americans have grown up with. From the smooth Arabica beans of Colombia, to the strong kick of Vietnamese Robusta, to the floral and herbal notes of Ethiopian varieties. Each origin represents not just a taste, but a cultural link that could soon be severed. Not because preferences have changed, but because of policy decisions made thousands of miles away. According to the ICO, Brazil supplies about 37% of the world's coffee. Vietnam accounts for 17%, Colombia 8%, and Ethiopia 6%. Together, these four nations represent nearly 70% of global production, and now all may be caught in the crosshairs of US tariffs. Market prices are already reacting. New York Arabica futures have surged nearly 35% since June, climbing from $1.75 to $2.40 per pound in early August. London Robusta has jumped 56%, from $1.25 to $1.95. These increases aren't just numbers on a screen. They ripple through the entire system, affecting farmers, exporters, shipping companies, roasters, retailers, and ultimately, the millions of people who rely on a steady, affordable cup of coffee to start their day. The global coffee market is being reshaped in real time, and what comes next will depend as much on diplomacy as it does on demand. For decades, the United States has been the center of gravity in the global coffee trade, not just because of how much it consumes, but because of its influence on everything from quality standards to pricing models, trade relationships, and even global coffee culture. Brands like Starbucks, Peet's Coffee, and Green Mountain position themselves as cultural intermediaries, connecting farmers in the global South with coffee drinkers in the global North. But things are changing. With Washington pivoting from open market leadership to protectionist gatekeeping, many international suppliers are reconsidering where they send their beans. Increasingly, they're looking toward Canada, Europe, and parts of Asia, regions that offer more stable returns, fewer political risks, and more predictable trade environments. For the first time in recent memory, the United States is no longer setting the rules. It's scrambling to keep up with them, and the longer exporters look away, the harder it will be to bring them back. Trust is the real currency in global trade, says Brazilian export consultant Rafael Oliveira. If you can't offer that, someone else will. This isn't just about shifting shipping routes, it's about shifting global influence. If coffee producers start bypassing the US to avoid policy uncertainty, America's ability to shape the future of the industry could quietly fade, even if consumption levels remain high. Which leads to a deeper, more personal question. Where does control really lie? When a tariff thousands of miles away changes the flavor of your daily coffee. When your favorite blend disappears without warning. When the only option is to pay more or settle for less. Are you still making that choice? Or has it already been made for you? As Brazil pulls back, Canada is stepping into the spotlight. And consumers, on both sides of the border, are quietly adjusting to a new normal. The coffee trade is no longer just about economics. It's about power, trust, and the realization that a small policy decision can send ripples across the globe, into homes, cafés, and lives in ways few people expect. What began as a trade dispute has evolved into something much bigger, a test of national influence, sovereignty, and the future of regional alliances. Canada is showing that it's not just the United States' junior partner. It's a resource-rich, strategically important player capable of redrawing the rules when pushed. While the US still holds the title of the world's largest economy, this standoff is exposing just how dependent it is on its quieter northern neighbor for energy, minerals, and increasingly strategic leverage. Every tariff, every trade deal, every quiet shift outside Washington's control, it's all part of a larger story, one where the old balance of power is beginning to shift. The next move in this trade chessboard could reshape the economic map for a generation. Sure, your morning coffee may still taste familiar, or maybe, just maybe, something about it feels slightly off. The real question is, are you still choosing your coffee, or is someone else choosing it for you? Have you held on to your favorite roast, or had to switch because it simply vanished from the shelf? Share your story in the comments. And if you found this breakdown insightful, please consider subscribing to the Timefold channel and hit that like button to help us keep digging deeper into the stories that shape your everyday life.